So today we're going to be learning about dialogue. I'm going to show you and not tell you. I'm going to use some basic principles that you need to know when you're trying to fix dialogue in your writing. Imagine yourself, you're sitting here, you've just finished your first draft and you're rereading it and you hate this dialogue section and you want to improve on it. So let's use some basic dialogue and principles to make this so much more richer and engaging for the reader. But to make it easier, I'm going to break it out into like a storyboard setting just to get you in the habit of trying to imagine each character at each moment of their dialogue. So here we have a character I'm naming Jake. Jake said, interested, "You're not saying anything. Why are you being so quiet?" Emily said stonily, "I don't think there's anything left to talk about your affair." Jake said, "But it didn't mean anything to me, I swear." Emily pouts angrily. "If it didn't mean anything, why does it feel like it means everything?" Jake pleaded guiltily. "It was a one-time thing, and I'm not seeing her anymore." Emily slammed her hand on the table and shouts, "I don't want to hear it anymore. I'm done with this." Jake pleaded, "Please don't leave. I don't want this to be over." Emily walks out the door and the waiter comes over to present the bill. Jake said disgustedly, "Ugh, I guess I'll pay for the meal." Now again, imagine this is you reading this. This is your writing. And it's terrible. And you want to fix it. And we're going to do that. I was going to say let's dive in, but a viewer told me I always say let's dive in. So I won't do that right now. We'll jump in or just start. Instead of us just overtly saying he's interested, one of the ways that we can convey that is having the character move. The best way to do it in this particular case is why don't we just say Jake leans in. And instead of saying the same thing twice, let's cut it down. So Jack leans in, barely said a word. Okay, let's keep going. Again, we're using the word stonily here, which is, a very telling adverb, and we cannot get rid of that right away. Plus, she's really overtly stating what's bothering her. At least in these type of situations, people just don't get expressly to the point and can actually define exactly what's bothering them. Or they don't want to state it, but they're mad at the character and they want to show the character they're mad. Now, ways to fix this are actually pretty easy. Emily folded her arms, leaning back from her untouched plate. So you notice what I did here is, again, I've relied on some visual details to show that she is very disengaged or unhappy with Jake. Instead of just being overtly saying you had an affair, we're actually going to take it a step further. We're getting into her state of mind. And when someone says what's left to say, that's a very weighty phrase. It doesn't tell you exactly what's bothering her, but it tells you that she's at the end of her rope after having an affair. So instead of explaining that there's an affair, we're showing that she's at the last stages of interest in this relationship. So it's a great way to punch up your dialogue by having it more meaningful. And the reader doesn't have to know everything at any given point. We're going to get to that. And we're also going to avoid expressly stating it. We're going to try to suggest what it is. And the great thing with dialogue is if you can narrow down your dialogue choices, you can narrow down the options for the reader of where they think the story is going. And ideally, the best dialogue leaves the reader only one option to know what is going on behind the scenes. So this one here is not too bad, but we're still going to fix it. Let's just get rid of that. So he pleads, it meant nothing. Now, what I like about that is you could have probably kept what you had before, but there's no harm in reducing words when you don't have to have them. And I always like to keep my dialogue and descriptions tight, so leverage the fewest amount of words possible to convey the deepest meaning. And sometimes just saying a few words is enough versus rambling on. Again, seeing this over-reliance on adverbs. If it didn't mean anything, why does it feel like it means everything? Now, I do like this. I think it is pretty good. But again, like the previous example, we can still cut it down and actually make it more punchier. Although if it didn't mean anything, why does it feel like it means everything? Is a lot. She's kind of repeating what Jake is trying to imply. So we don't need to repeat that. The readers can get bored with it. So let's just cut to the chase. She laughs. Cold, sharp. then why does it feel like everything? So what you can see here, instead of saying, she laughs angrily, yeah, I'm going to add in she laughs. I think that's a great detail that we had in our first draft. But instead of using an adverb to explain it, I'm just going to use some richer words for it. And here's an em dash, because I want to emphasize the meaning. Yeah, she laughs, but in reality, that laugh is to convey disappointment and anger, cold, sharp. And cutting down that sentence from those two phrases to one line, I think it actually punches it up and makes it stronger. Again, if you're actually using a lot of these adverbs, you can actually get rid of almost all of them. And by trying to describe what is going on versus explain it or summarize it, you're going to have automatically better writing and ironically, better dialogue. So let's get rid of this. Remember, we're in a scene and the characters are engaging with each other. So it doesn't always have to be focusing on the reaction of the character speaking. You can have a character reacting to something that the other character is doing. So to some degree, that's an off-camera type movement, but we're going to convey that in writing. So let's do this. Her eyes lock onto his, and Jake's shoulders sag. Now, I like that because automatically, it puts her in a position of strength, and Jake already, we know he feels guilty. We know this is bothering him, and he's starting to deflate. He knows he's starting to lose. And without overtly explicitly saying that, the reader's going to get that sense as well. And here he's going to try to defend himself. It was one time, a simple mistake, and let's cut that off because we're going to use some action in the next scene. Emily slams her palm on the table. Conversations hush. So right here is a great example of where we're actually trying to, just like in a movie, we go between the two characters' point of view and then we step out a little further, see one character's reaction to someone speaking, and then another step further to see how, let's say, the environment is reacting. In this case, it's a restaurant. So you have a bunch of patrons who suddenly see this woman slam her hand down the table, conversations hush. And we kind of all know that feeling of, when you're the center of someone's attention and it's negative, that sense of shame. And I think the reader will too. They're going to recognize that feeling that Jake is probably feeling, and they'll get a little squeamish. So you're kind of allowing the reader to start feeling the emotions of these characters, and then it allows them to invest in them. And you can see here, he's kind of duplicating, please don't leave, I don't want this to be over. We don't necessarily have to repeat that. And instead of being so explicit in what he's going to say, let's try something like this. And, because he's feeling that shame, he's not going to get everything he wants to say out. So let's double down on that. His voice falters under the weight of the stairs beyond hers. So in this way, what we're doing is we're not only talking about Jake's reaction, we're talking about Emily's reaction, we're talking about the restaurant's reaction, and the weight of that moment is all pressing down on him and it's overwhelming him. He can't get out those words. So that's a great way with dialogue, is you don't have to say everything. And sometimes a pause or silence or a description of what's going on beyond them or around them is a very powerful way to convey many different emotions in a short sentence. So here we have Emily walks out the door and the waiter comes over to present the bill. Now that's fairly straightforward. We can still add some sensory description to this. Her chair scrapes back. So that's a good auditory sense to get the reader in that same space. She stands. And let's go back to Jake. Jake's eyes dart around for support, but only the waiter meets his gaze, stepping forward to present the bill. So what I like that it's somewhat immersive. You're getting into Jake's mindset. He's looking for help. He's feeling that shame and pressure of everyone around him. He has no one to blame but himself. He has no one else to support him. And then he sees his love walking away. And again, we're going to build on that waiter presenting a bill. And I kind of like that. And this is where we can add some metaphor to this dialogue to convey greater weight to the scene and greater weight to the moment of him being interrupted by the waiter, representing potentially all the mistakes he's made to this point. And here, this line, Jake said disgustedly, I guess I'll pay for the meal, is pretty weak. But leveraging a metaphor, we can make that actually, I think, pretty powerful. Let's do that. So Jake tightens his fists. Heat rising in his face. He's rooted to his chair as she walks out. Finally, he reaches for his wallet to pay for this mess. Now, with this metaphor, I'm not being very explicit about it, but a reader would get it. They would understand that subcontext, that him being rooted to his chair, he feels that pressure of the mistake he's made and maybe the shame and judgment around him. And then he has to pay for this mess. Now, of course, the mess is the uneaten dinner and so on a surface level, but in a deeper level, readers will know this is something much bigger. What we reviewed is the natural dialogue and subtext versus being overly explicit. We leverage action and atmosphere versus just simply dialogue. We used word economy, so we cut down the words we didn't need and the duplication of meaning in some of the phrases. And then we started focusing on more impactful delivery. So dialogue that carries greater meaning than simply just expressly stating something. We want to essentially have a double meaning sometimes to the words. And then we kept up the momentum and pacing. So it wasn't just all dialogue. It was dialogue, it was movement, it was senses, it was feelings. It was not only each character from what each said, but it's how they reacted to each other and how the room and those around them react. And what that enabled us to do is not just have state emotion. He was ashamed, he pleaded, he was mad, she was mad. Like, we can get around all of that. We don't state any emotions. But by those actions, senses, and feelings, we're showing that as part of this dialogue. And I think our dialogue becomes richer for it. Now, if you like this video, click like and subscribe. I'm happy to do more of these, so just add that in the comments if you're interested. Happy writing.